Good. All right. Welcome, everyone, back to episode 2 of the Eh-soteric Archives. Happy to be here. I'm Andrew.
I'm Mike.
And I think last time we forgot to do a little bit of housekeeping.
Yeah, we'll take care of that now.
First episode and all. But we do have social media. We got Instagram, X, Substack, all that good stuff. So head down to the show notes and there'll be links to all that down there.
Yep. And follow us on there too, please.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to be kind of breaking down the episodes and doing some extra little writing pieces and whatnot, providing links and stuff like that for the Substack. So it's a good place to kind of follow along and
for sure.
Yeah.
The Substack will have some things that aren't contained necessarily in the podcast.
Yeah. Good way to stay engaged with us and communicate with us, send us questions and all that stuff. So yeah. Thanks if you watched the first one and are back for the second. We got a kind of a exciting topic to cover today and something very Canadian indeed.
Yeah, big topic.
Yeah, kind of all encompassing and spans a long timeline there. So we will be talking about Wendigo,
or Witeko,
or white ego, as I've heard as well.
Yeah.
So
Wendigo, I believe it's known by many names.
Yeah. The kind of initial iteration of it, I believe, was the Wendigo. Yeah, and that's so it's an emaciated monster-like creature, often seen in the cold, dark nights of winter, and kind of finds its place in our First Nations stories and history there.
Yeah, mainly I believe in the Algonquin speaking people in their oral traditions, but you see similar stories in other places as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely not a uncommon kind of theme in horror and pop culture and all that stuff. I was actually looking into it, and there's kind of similar stories tracing back to the early 1500s in European werewolf lore.
Interesting.
Yeah, which, and to kind of tie the two together, Wendigo is effectively a sort of a demonic possession kind of thing. It a spirit, an entity that sort of overcomes the host and causes it to degrade and kind of disconnect from the human spirit. And so that with the werewolf lore, that I believe the original kind of offshoot of the werewolf, or lycanthrope, I think is
I believe so. Yeah.
It's so it was a curse for doing bad deeds. Essentially, it was a curse that they would have to continually feed and prey on innocent people and innocent lives, and by doing so, that spreads the virus or the curse. So it's very, very similar to the kind of Canadian version.
It is, because it's seen as like a Slender Man type figure that's giant and gone and can never be full, right?
Sort of always decaying, always just kind of, if it doesn't continually feed, it'll just fall apart and die, sort of thing.
It does grow in relation, like the Wendigo is supposed to grow in relation to what it eats.
So obviously the more it consumes, the more it grows, right?
And it's a malevolent, like cannibalistic kind of monster. That's how you describe the Wendigo, I would believe.
Yeah. It was interesting too. I was looking into, obviously, because Wendigo sort of covers eastern to central Canada as far as the First Nation stories go. But I was curious if there was something similar for the Pacific Northwest, out this way. And there is.
It's the Wachuje or
something like that. Yeah. I did have it here, but either way, what I found interesting about it is it's a female. So the Eastern Canada Wendigo is this masculine sort of figure. I mean, it's kind of sexless. They don't really claim it's a male. Yeah, but it definitely has more masculine features and is kind of framed that way. Whereas it's like a wild witch woman of the woods and calls out to children, and if they answer her calls, she'll eat them.
So same kind of trickster, malevolent spirit, but female.
Yeah, and
and cannibalistic as well.
In a lot of their ceremonies, they have masks that depict this witch woman, and then they'll invoke the spirit, and in order to cast it out of the person. It's part of their sort of ritual.
Interesting. So they'll call it out to bring it to the forefront, and then that's the way they get rid of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
Yeah.
Similar to what we're talking about today.
And the funniest I just like, this is my 12-year-old brain speaking, but the funniest detail was that they gave her like hangers, like they depict her as having these like droopy breasts. So she's got these like big old saggy milkers on her that I just thought was kind of funny. Not related, but it was on the top of my head, so I had to say it. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting that the masculine versus feminine part of it, because I feel like Eastern Canadian First Nations definitely had more of that, more of a influence from the settlers and things like that. Like they were more colonialized and kind of entrenched in that, whereas the Pacific Northwest, I feel like, were able to maintain a little more of their culture.
Well, I think that the Eastern was settled first too.
Well, yeah,
right,
yeah, but with it being, a sort of a female, because their culture sort of stood the test of time a little more and is more connected to the earth and nature. Yep. It has more of that kind of feminine, fine feminine sort of thing to it. So I just thought it was really interesting.
Maybe too, because they were a bit more removed. Maybe that story, it carries more weight now. It's more true. Do you know what I mean? It hasn't been changed by what we'll talk about in a little bit, but by the pop culture renditions of the Wendigo. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe that's the truer way that it was seen. Who knows?
Who knows? I think it's, so I guess we could jump into a couple of the more well-known cases of Wendigo psychosis and kind of where it was first documented. I think the first famous case was the Swift Runner case, which actually took place kind of my old stomping grounds, Fort Saskatchewan.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. And so he was just an interpreter for the Hudson's Bay Company and a guide.
Scout for the Northwest Mounted Police as well.
Yeah,
just north of Edmonton, I believe, is where he lived. Also, I just wanted to backtrack just a quick sec, just to go when talking about the history of the Wendigo. That was in 1878, 1879, right? Swift Runner?
It was the winter of 1878, yeah.
And up until then, so like that was a big deal because that gained national, although Canada wasn't very old, it was in the press.
Yeah.
Like people read about Swift Runner. Up until then, it hadn't really been in the public eye. It had been in a lot of like HBC accounts, like Hudson Bay Trading Post accounts. A lot of Jesuit missionaries, spoke about the different encounters they had. I think Paul Lejeune was a Jesuit missionary in 1636. That's the first time it was written about. But the lore had been there in oral traditions for, millennia, centuries to millennia before white men came. And then that kind of, there's these accounts, and then that leads us to Swift Runner. And that is it's a kind of a horrific case. And so
it was a pretty brutal winter, 1878. And he was only 25 kilometers away from Fort
miles,
Saskatchewan.
I think. Yeah, like 50. Same, he was close enough to go get supplies if he needed to.
Correct. Yeah. And apparently, he just kind of became a recluse for that winter. No one heard from him. And he was actually well respected in the community.
He was
well known being an intelligent man, good at what he did. And then no one really heard from him for the whole winter. And all of a sudden he emerges, and the RCMP go to check his settlement and find his entire family, his wife and kids, unalived.
Yeah. And with evidence of cannibalism,
mutilation.
And he didn't fight it. He admitted it, I believe, immediately. And so that's the not interesting, but the part that brings in the Wendigo is he claimed that a malevolent spirit spoke to him, in those in that liminal darkness time, and that you know what I mean, and talked to him and told him to eat his family and got him to do it. And I believe did some horrific things by making him watch what they did to his son. And
yeah, it was I mean, the what I did read about it was very horrific.
yeah,
Like, yeah, horror movie stuff.
but that's so going back to that's the first time it kind of people start the Western world starts consuming this idea
Yeah.
of Wendigo.
And I think it's the timing of it is kind of peculiar. You know, like you said, Canada had only been a country for 12 years at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and with this being, you know, all consuming kind of greed, taboo fueled entity, you know, the Dominion of Canada spell had been cast and it was well underway.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
and I think the some of the First Nations people, I would imagine, like because they had to interact with the HBC and things like that. Did they feel guilt about being part of what was going on?
yeah, no, well, exactly.
Like,
right.
is that where
Like,
this comes from?
I don't doubt that it was that severing of culture was so significant at the time, and it wasn't like there had been that generation after generation where it had maybe been diluted.
Mm-hmm.
This was fresh. So yeah, I'm sure there was a level of guilt with the people that were involved with helping out the Hudson's Bay Company and working for them, especially if they were from these tribes.
It must have weighed quite heavy, you would think, on things that they did because they have to do it to provide, but
Exactly.
right at what cost?
Yeah.
And this story shows too, like how it preys throughout time and up until this point. Wendigo really does prey on the the weak, the isolated, the socially isolated,
The desperate.
yeah, and people with a spiritual imbalance. And I would think that would make it hard to fight it. Not I would think that would make it very hard to fight it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of crazy that he was able to come out of it enough to even admit his guilt, to turn himself in. Obviously there was a lapse in the stronghold that had on him, and he was able to at least somewhat atone for what he did. He was hanged for it. And it is a RCMP case you can look up today. There's notes from the court cases. I believe that was the first mention of Wendigo psychosis in a court case.
I believe so.
Yeah.
The next case that kind of involving Wendigo that's important, I believe, is the Joseph Fiddler.
Yeah. That one's really interesting because he was a shaman. He was a spiritual leader in the community, and he kind of took it upon himself to take care of the Wendigo virus that had been spreading amongst their people.
I believe him and his brother, so at the time of, we're going to get into his story in a second, then that occurs in 1907. At that time, he's like 80 something.
Yeah.
And him and his brother had claimed that they had rid 14 Wendigo, exterminated from this earth kind of thing.
Yeah.
Also should go and say that want to say that the shamans as well didn't just believe that death was the only, like if someone had turned into a Wendigo, my understanding is that was the only option. But if Wendigo had spread through a village or something, they would use ceremonies and smudging and other techniques to try to get rid of the spirit if they could.
Yeah.
This was a last resort.
And I believe they also had to burn the body. It was a cremation process at the end.
I know there's something about, removing the heart too is a big thing of it. So yeah, this Jack Fiddler and Joseph Fiddler were shamans and in a northwestern Ontario, kind of southeast Manitoba border in that area, the Lake of the Woods kind of area. And the Northwest Mounted Police hadn't been in that area. When you read the accounts, it was the first time that a lot of the people who lived there had actually seen a white man. When the Northwest Mounted Police in 1907 came to basically flex their muscles, you know what I mean? Let the people know that they were kind of taken over.
Right.
And up until that moment, they'd only followed native law. So yeah, these Northwest Mounted Police go in, a couple officers, and they immediately find out about Jack Fiddler and his brother Joseph exterminating the Wendigo, and they arrest him and his brother.
And he tries to use sort of like their cultural law
Yeah.
in place of the Canadian law.
Another thing from when you read the account too, it seems as if they not seems as if they had no concept that there was a court of law outside of their own.
Yeah.
Like they literally had no idea that that existed.
Which fair enough. It was
100%.
thrust upon them.
Yeah.
Wasn't the way they did things, but yeah. See, I was thinking about that one, and it's obviously their case was that they unalived these 14 people because it was spreading and they had to, because from my understanding, there were a few of them that weren't officially overtaken by this yet. He just assumed that they were going to be.
Yes.
So just kind of got my head spinning where I was like, okay, he's exterminating the Wendigo, but he's kind of running a train on it and he can't stop. Like who was inflicted?
Yeah.
Was it these people or was it actually this guy?
Was he a wounded healer?
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of healers generally are. Is my understanding as I'm learning more and more about this. Like,
well, as you take on trauma throughout your stint, your career, yeah, that's gonna weigh on you and it just chips away at pieces of you, right?
Well, it certainly did, because he escaped from prison only to go for a long walk and not come back.
Yeah.
That was Jack Fiddler, and his
brother was
hung. And then 3 days after he was hung, he was actually acquitted, or there was an appeal that had been filed, was heard and granted.
Oof.
But it was 3 days after he'd been hung. So,
oof.
Yeah.
Bummer. Yeah.
So it's interesting though, I think, because the timing of this, right, as we get into Wendigo, we're at 1907. 1910 is the appearance of the Wendigo book.
Yeah.
Or the novella.
The first appearance in pop culture and literature, modern literature anyways. And Algernon Blackwood, I remembered it this time, was the guy who wrote that book. He's an interesting cat. He was an English guy, grew up in a fairly prominent household. His dad was worked for the Royal Post, I believe it was. He was
a knighted postmaster.
Yeah, wild. Didn't know that was possible. But
his mom was part of the Duke of Manchester line as well. So he was an affluent. He came from an affluent family.
Yeah. But a very staunch religious upbringing.
Yes.
So, which was mainly in part because of his father. His father was a very, very strict man. And because of this, Algernon, did I get it right?
Algernon, yeah.
Algernon. He kind of rebelled and started getting into occult teachings.
Yeah, it started, I believe, with a traveler to their house left a Hindu, like a yogi Hindu book.
Okay.
And that was his first kind of exposure to it, and
was sort of the Vedic stuff.
Yeah. His dad sent him away after that, apparently, and sent him to Switzerland to go to school. He then studied with the Moravian Brotherhood in Germany.
Oh, wild.
Went back to back to British Isles, and went to university at the Edinburgh U for agriculture.
Yep.
And then that's what brought him to Canada.
Right.
So this is he's 21 years old, I think, around there.
And that was to basically work, that was with some dairy farm or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Running it effectively, but.
Yeah, it takes his inheritance. I think he tried his hand at dairy farming using what he learned in university for that 1 year. But apparently even when he was in university, he didn't care too much about agriculture. He was still really interested in theosophy. Came to Canada, opened a dairy farm, failed.
Yeah.
Tried a shot at hotels, failed. Founded the Toronto Theosophical Society in 1891, co-founded it, and then he, that was kind of it for Canada for him, I think, in his mind. But before he left, he decided to spend 5 or 6 months kind of couch surfing around Muskoka.
Yeah.
Had a really interesting time.
Took his gap year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he wrote a lot of stories too from that time. I believe he was writing articles for newspapers, like essays, that sort of thing. I read a couple of his just almost like travel to Muskoka like him talking about staying there and how beautiful it is and how
He had
instead
a
of
travel blog.
kind of, yeah, that's what it seemed like when you read it. It was quite interesting. I used to spend a lot of time there when I was younger, so I kind of it resonated with me. And there's a few other things about this fellow that are really interesting as well, but this was one for sure for me. But the one takeaway I had from it was him talking about this Chippewa warrior who apparently haunted the Joseph River, and they would see it and other people would see it. Like he would see it, people around there would see it, they talk about it. And I used to fish that river a lot, like I'm not going to say how long ago, a while ago. And we always were creeped out when we would go in the Joseph River. It was weird.
For any specific reason?
No, just creeped out, just felt weird,
vibes.
Didn't want to be there. It was a weird, and that's apparent. I didn't know this when I read that story. I was like, oh my God, it kind of, yeah.
That's a nice little sink.
Yeah. So this time in Canada also kind of reinforced his belief that there's psychic energy everywhere in nature. Like he really had this kind of instilled in him after the time in Canada. And sorry for going on about him. I just find him so fascinating.
He's a weird guy. He's a very weird guy.
I'm going to go through just kind of his life real quickly and then we can go back. But when you hear of his life, anyway. I also know that people at that time like had a different life, especially if you had a bit of money, you could, like now, I guess too, you could go experience the world a bit differently than.
Yeah. Well, it was really the only way to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he ends up leaving Muskoka, goes to New York City, becomes a court reporter for, I think, the New York Sun. This is like in 1893, where the part of it, what he has to do is interview the people who are in court. So he interviews many murderers, including Lizzie Borden.
Oh, no way.
Interesting, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's mentioned in a few places that was one of the people he interviewed. I believe it's in some of his writings as well. After that, he becomes addicted to morphine, homeless, and then immediately starts writing as a journalist for the New York Times. So he does those two things. I imagine cleans up maybe a little bit, enough to be a journalist for the New York Times.
Yeah.
Which who knows? Then I think it had a different sway than it does now. So he did that for a little while. Possibly went to go seek a gold rush. There's not a lot of information about that. It's pretty vague about what he does. But what is clear is in 1899, he heads back to England. But just before that, he works as a private secretary for a James Spire, who's an investment banker, whose big thing in 1899 when he was working for him was railroads. And he was in business with J.P. Morgan and W.K. Vanderbilt, two pretty well-known, anyway.
Heavy hitters.
Just found that to see where this guy travels and how he goes, and then he goes back to England in 1900, and that's when.
Yeah, he always seems to find his way in front of the most important person at whatever he's doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, I guess, he is connected. He's got a name, but still.
Yeah.
For his age, seems kind of odd. I had a lot of odd jobs in my 20s,
Yeah.
But
not like that.
I wasn't running the show at any of them.
No.
Yeah.
But he was very connected places. Do you know what I mean? I don't know what it was like then, but it just seems like he kind of bounced around and fit in right away.
Yeah.
Well, when he bounces back to England in 1900, he immediately joins the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Immediately. And while he's joining, so this moment when he joins is the exact time that there's a split within it wasn't around for very long. I think it was only 10 or 15 years before that. It was started by some Rosicrucians. But at this time in 1900, they have a bit of an issue with letting Aleister Crowley in. So they decide to let Aleister Crowley in. There is a split, and that's when he joins, right at that moment, like right at the exact same time. And he's introduced into the the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn by W.B. Yeats, which is like he knows people.
Yeah.
Point we're getting at, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and while there, so he becomes, I think he gets to the level of Adeptus Minor of the 6th degree. So that's not like high up.
Does it work the same as Freemasonry, where it's like 33, 34 levels or whatever?
Not that. I think the highest level is like a 12th.
Okay.
So he's like halfway just above halfway if you look at like the chart, which I don't have here, but
yeah,
he's made it. And that's as far as Aleister Crowley got as well in this. Just throwing out there. And the reason I'm saying it is it's not that he just had the milieu of the time, like the people he was around, a lot of them were into this sort of thing, right? So it's not a stretch to, people dabbled in it.
Yeah.
But the fact that he stuck around to become an Adeptus minor, like he was in it. His heart was in it. It was something that was interesting to him. It wasn't just a passing fancy.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So this second set or second level, this inner order that he reached, he would have been taught magic, scrying, astral travel, and alchemy. Like, yeah. So this is 1900. We're still talking about the Wendigo author. Sorry.
Yeah.
So 1906, some of his stories start to be published. And when he talked or wrote about it, he made it seem as like an aw shucks moment. He didn't even really want them to be published. And a friend grabbed them and published them, and everyone loved them.
Right.
That got him to start writing more proficiently and more often. And then in 1910 is when he wrote The Wendigo, like the actual book, which we'll go over real quickly after we're done getting into this. But just after writing The Wendigo, World War I breaks out. He's a spy.
Okay.
No joke.
Yeah, this guy's got
a spy for the British intelligence in Switzerland.
Yeah.
He works for the Red Cross at the same time, trying to get families back together with lost loved ones after the war. In 1934, so that during this time is that the war happens, he writes more and more and more, gets more notoriety. In 1934, he begins telling his stories on the BBC radio. So now it's not just the written word, like now it's his voice as well, right? That's starting to kind of embed this Wendigo, and all of his other stories are similar too. They don't have the same characters, Wendigo, the same monster, but similar ideas.
A lot of them are centered around just different hauntings and things like that.
And nature, especially. Yeah. In 1936, he appears on the first television broadcast in England.
And that's on the BBC?
On the BBC as well. And it's just him reading stories. It's like it's hard to explain. It was essentially him just reading stories, but he was still on television, right?
Right.
And it's crazy to think like just that he writes this book, like radio has already been invented, movies have been invented, but they're not really that big yet. And as soon as he writes that book, he gets into radio, he gets into TV, radio, TV, movies all take off. And everyone's just, that's the beginning of like mass cultural consumption, essentially, right? Is that time. Almost done. Sorry, I'll be quick.
No, this is great.
So his nickname was the Magic Man. That was another thing. Like he's called the Magic Man, not like Magic Man from like Talladega Nights.
Yeah.
Kind of magic, you know what I mean? But, and it was hard to figure out why. I know that he did have an interest in parapsychology, and he apparently was a bit of a ghost hunter. He dabbled in it here and there. But in 1947 on Halloween, he did this trick, we'll call it, on live television, where he was reading his stories like he normally would. And in this story, someone disappears. And as he's telling the story and talking about the character disappearing in the story, the camera pans over to him and he's gone. And right, like if that happened now, people would be like, okay, well, he left.
Yeah, left the room.
But at the time, because TV was a new thing, it caused a mass panic. When you read about it, it actually caused like the switchboard was flooded with phone calls asking where he went. And so that's how he got the name, the Magic Man. It kind of built his persona a bit.
That was 47?
1947. In 1948, he receives a CBE, which is like a Order of the British Empire, which not easy to get.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For all of his work. And then in 1951, he passes.
Yeah.
And
he's in his early 80s, I believe.
Yeah. And he passes childless and unmarried. Like stayed that way his whole life. Kind of preferred nature to.
Yeah, I read like the only real friends he had were other authors outside of his occult groups, you know.
And he influenced, I think a lot of those authors later talked about how much he influenced them. But yeah, I can't remember their names at the moment. And so just thinking about that time, getting back to 1910 when Wendigo comes out, like, so Frankenstein, like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein's written in 1818, I think, or somewhere around there. Bram Stoker's Dracula is like 1897. So like it's kind of the beginning of horror, right? Like horror is just kind of and I wouldn't even call Algernon, like I wouldn't even call the Wendigo novella horror. It's more like he was known as weird stories. That's what they were classified as, but they're more mind horror
like a
than
psychological thriller.
exactly. Yeah. And he kind of not created that genre, but I think he was like a pioneer in it for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Whether he took a story and did something with it, that's to discuss later, but
yeah.
So yeah, I just think it's interesting that he took it from like an oral tradition to like the written word to the spoken word, kind of did all of that. And he did that from his time in Canada. Like that's where he learned about it.
Yeah, and it's so and his Wendigo book is based off of apparently his time in the wilderness and stories from people that he'd encountered.
Yeah.
But I find it, again, it's a timing thing, right? Like that's so what, 12 years after Swift Runner is when he's in Canada kind of experiencing these things.
And a couple of years after the Jack Fiddler story too, right? So that was 1907. I don't know if he would have heard about it or not. Do you know what I mean? Where he was, maybe he wouldn't have. But what I think is interesting is the Wendigo, his novella, and the Jack Fiddler story take place in almost the same area.
Yeah.
Like northwestern, it's Lake of the Woods, like that kind of Northwest Ontario area.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you, you read the book, yeah? Or the novella?
I skimmed it. I more so read about him. I dug into him. Yeah, because I'd heard.
It's not that long anyway. And it's all the same stories, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'd read a bunch of the older Cree stories and accounts that they're not officially documented, but passed down kind of thing.
So yeah, his book, The Wendigo, or novella, The Wendigo, explains everything introduces us to this monster. One other interesting thing about his novella, before we move on, is that there's 4 characters in the book. There's five. There's in the hunting party. There's the 2 scouts. There's a divinity student, a young divinity student, who I imagine he kind of saw himself as possibly. But then there's also an author, and the author, they say it in the book, writes about collective hallucination, which is interesting. Just when we speak later about Witeko and Paul Levy, like it.
Yeah.
Like I feel like it's something he recognized early on.
I almost wonder if the characters in the book were all supposed to be him.
I like different parts of him.
Yeah.
Like the divinity student and I could totally see that.
Because part of this is the fracturing of the self. That's what kind of like solidifies Wendigo in the person is the fracturing of their spirit into a bunch of different pieces and the removal of like, that human side.
And I know we'll get into Jung in a little bit as well. That was like a little bit, like when he wrote, that was a little bit before Jung had published a lot of his theories, but I think other people were thinking it was in the collective mind, like that idea of the shadow and.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So that is Algernon Blackwood.
Yeah.
Odd fellow. So what did he actually do?
Well, yeah. So this is one of those things too, and I know we talked about his name. His name doesn't seem real. It seems like a made up name. And I know that, it might just sound silly because there's all kinds of names out there. And I'm not a master on like, where names come from, but it just reminds me of like, the Ingersoll Lockwood thing with the Baron Trump book and all these, all these like culturally relevant books that are all of a sudden culturally relevant. No one's ever heard of them before. Yeah. And they kind of appear out of nowhere. And I know there is like obviously record of this guy doing what he did, but at the same time, it's sort of like, was he this made up figure? Like what was, not saying that he didn't exist in the flesh, but was he a plant? Was he seated?
Was he playing a part? Was he? Yeah, I agree. And he's in a lot of places too, right? Like, yeah. I don't know. He seems from the minute we started looking into this and you've read about him, it just gets your spidey senses going. You know what I mean? Like there's something off about him.
Yeah.
But there's something when I do, like I read a lot about him. There's something off about him, but there's also something that I find ridiculously interesting. So it's At Ingersoll Lockwood, I don't think there's as much about him, but what you know is also interesting.
Yeah, the big part to me is that he's sort of got the ball rolling um with the pop culture side of things, and just
100%.
yeah, until then it was just stories around a campfire essentially. And after that, all of a sudden, we have more cases appearing. People are the Hudson's Bay company, the people at the trade posts and stuff, the guys were talking about it, and it became common to share stories of what they were hearing in the woods, and people that lost their minds on excursions and this and that. And that was, whether that was a way to kind of scare the
Yeah.
Hudson's Bay workers into, complying and being a part of this. And it's like, you don't get near these people. There's something going on with them.
Was it a way to scare? Because at that time too, when he wrote it, there was a lot of English coming to Canada still, right, through immigration. Was it a way to scare them? Was it a way? Do you know what I mean? To get that in there, because all those people would have, not all of them, but some would have read the novella or heard of it anyway, or heard the story, and then they moved to Canada, and that's in their brain, right?
Yeah.
Like as his cultural reach grew,
Yeah.
like it became more embedded. Do you know what I mean? The Wendigo,
yeah, the actual
idea became more embedded in the Western imagination, and then are we creating it, or
yeah, is this just a manifestation of our minds, or is this a real spirit? I was looking up some of the older cases and just trying to find correlations between time of year and time of day that these sightings happened. Always during the winter, always during the
Yes.
dark of the winter, like
the darkest time of
Yeah.
year? Yeah.
which, is Canada can be sort of viewed as this like northern recluse kind of thing, like this place where people go to be remote and to be away from all of it. There's everything's so spread out. There's a lot of trees for things to hide behind. They also tend to happen between 3 and 4 a.m.
Most, yeah.
That whole witching hour, the liminal space between when the veil is thinnest,
Yeah.
is when these creatures tend to pop up. So, I mean,
that space between kind of.
It is a bit of a perfect storm with you have a new colonial kind of settlement like taken over. The cultural landscape of an entire country is shifting drastically and not in a nice way. Canada itself, the crown their background is Rosicrucianism, is, this occult kind of underbelly of all of it. And so it kind of, yeah, it's not, to me, it's not too far fetched to think that, okay, yeah, maybe this was just people losing their minds because winter's hard, life's hard, everything's changing, could be that mixed with guilt of, betraying your own people. Or this was something brought over by the settlers, a spiritual entity that they had invoked to kind of cast upon the people and let it just run rampant and do its bidding.
Run wild in the world.
Yeah.
There's quite a bit of evidence that, at least maybe not the cannibalistic version of Wendigo, but the mind virus, like shadow version.
Yeah.
That there's a lot of evidence that that's true today.
So Paul Levy kind of broke into, and this is where Witeko comes in. So we're moving past sort of this horror monster demon kind of thing, and now into more of a spiritual possession and kind of overtaking the mind, and more of a just a modern day human and how it affects our society. I don't know if you want to touch on Paul Levy and his book at all, or
well, I've heard him on quite a few podcasts. What I get from him about Witeko is that it's a manifestation of like the collective shadow.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's a micro macro thing, right? The macro part of it is that, and it's more heightened in societies driven by mass consumption, which would for sure be Western.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's capitalism to a T, right?
Yeah. He also mentions how it's called by many different names. Like there's many names for it, but he believes it's essentially the same thing, whether it's archons or the counterfeit spirit or the shadow.
The shadow. Yeah.
Devil, like all Lucifer, sorry, all the same things are the same people in his mind. It's a trickster spirit. And essentially he believes it's the Witeko is taking your worst things, your worst fears, and hiding your gifts from you.
Yes.
Is essentially it. Yeah.
Overshadowing your, yeah. It's that severing of the spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there is a lot of evidence that is very true right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I think between technology, addictions, AI, even as people give their sovereignty away to the technology to just do everything for them, and the constant need for answers immediately. Everything's got to be, instantaneous. There's no stopping that. Where does it end? Right.
No. And then using that same, like first it was people just being addicted to their tech, not being able to not have their phone for whatever, whether it was to play silly game or just to be gotten a hold of whenever, like people.
Yeah.
It went from that to social media.
Yep.
On that device. And that's another thing too that Paul Levy talks about. You know what I mean? And his he does, because the good thing about Paul Levy is he offers solutions too. It's not just
it's he almost offers like the modern way to exercise these demons kind of thing. We're no longer putting on the cultural mask and dancing the spirits out, but in a way it's kind of the same. His take on it is that we need to effectively bring out our inner child again and creativity, and that's the way to defeat this.
And self-reflection, like all those. Yeah 100%. Whether it's like on, when you're doom scrolling, taking that minute or two after you've just been bombarded with left or right, this or that, separating people, to think about what you're looking at, why you're looking at it, who's feeding it to you, and understand why that's being done.
Yeah.
He believes that self-reflection about that is, without self-reflection on social media, it spreads the virus easily.
Oh, for sure. I mean, memes are a powerful tool.
Was just going to say, that's exactly it, right? Like one side posts a meme about what the other side did with a couple catchy captions that have been used over and over and over.
Yeah.
And that's it. Overnight, everyone's opinion on that one side is swayed. You know what I mean? And
yeah, we see it almost weekly in the news cycle now, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely worth addressing.
Yeah. The other thing too is he mentions compassion. So like compassion's another thing to combat this mind virus, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the shows I listened to him on, he was on the Higher Side Chats with Greg.
Shout out to Greg.
Greg's the man. And it was towards the end of it, and they were talking about something. And at the time, I'll tell you what Greg Carlwood said to him. And at the time, though, I felt the same way. And then I heard Paul's answer to how to deal with it, why you should invoke compassion. And it didn't make sense until he said it. And it was essentially like during the time of COVID when, a lot of people divided without getting into it. There was, some people weren't overly happy with everyone being masked. And that's the question Greg Carlwood said is, if society is a reflection of me, right? Well, what about the guy with the 3 masks and, you know what I mean? The 10 booster shots, like, how is that me? And I felt the same way at the time, you know what I mean? And Paul Levy just said, well, with compassion, you realize that is you. Like that's a reflection of you. And instead of approaching that person with anger and hostility in your backup, if you just go over with compassion, you can possibly start to alter things. You know what I mean? You're at least not feeding the virus, because it feeds off. It's another thing he mentions. Fear is a superfood of the Witeko, of the mind virus, or the Wendigo. It's the same thing, right? It's fear is the biggest fear of not getting food, fear of not being warm. Your mind starts playing tricks, right?
Yeah.
In liminal darkness, hypnagogic.
Yeah.
Like during that time too, right? There's so many.
Yeah. Well, I'd say, the big thing right now is living in abundance and not in scarcity, right? And that's, soothing those lower chakras, those like the butt chakra.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, and it's so I was actually thinking, because one thing we didn't mention was with the Wendigo, a lot of the cases they mentioned that there's a physical change that comes along with this as well. It's not just a mental thing.
No.
Like they're actually physically decay.
Yeah.
They're, it's sort of a shape shifting type thing. And it got me thinking about, modern day. And my wife and I were talking about just like celebrities, and we're like, God, there's a lot of celebrities that look like shit right now. Like they're just like falling apart.
It's crazy where you see them and you don't even recognize them.
Right. Yeah. And I understand that people age
and
whatever. And a lot of these guys and gals have had a lot of work done, and that doesn't necessarily age well.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of these celebrities that have, as we're finding out, partake in kind of not so nice things and stand up for not so nice things and
definitely do things that are taboo.
Yeah. And effectively sell their soul for fame and fortune. Not all, but, you can usually tell the ones that have. And it just, the image that popped right in my mind was that recent one of Ariana Grande after the premiere of that Wicked movie, and she just looks like how they describe Wendigo.
Yeah,
just to a T. She's emaciated. She's and you can't help but wonder if this, as we reach this sort of like cultural peak where things are what feels like on a tipping point.
Certainly does.
As some sort of bifurcation anyways, that like, maybe it's taken its toll on these people, and maybe it's like, yeah, there's not really a lot left. And because people aren't feeding this beast as much, people are waking up and they're not feeding this beast, their power is dwindling and they're falling apart. I mean, like
their stuff's also being called out now too. I think that's right. Like
when I when I read what the description of the Pacific Northwest, the female version of Wendigo, instantly in my head, Kathy Griffin, just like, just right away.
Awesome.
Kathy Griffin coming out of the woods to eat your baby. Like that
is horrific.
Yeah, that's terrifying shit.
I would run.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be wise.
With antlers? If it's post 1910, she'll have antlers. If it's pre 1910, no antlers.
Yeah, I think more just she's got the Sideshow Bob thing going on now. But it's just, bring it back into, again, my 12-year-old brain just runs away sometimes.
Yeah.
But it is, there's physical manifestations of it in our reality, and you can draw the parallels all day long. And I really don't think that it's that much of a stretch to say that this is a very real thing.
Not at all.
Yeah.
No, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
So do you want to bring the young parts into this, or?
Yeah, I mean, we can. Yeah.
Well, just is that what we're dealing with here? Like, I definitely think it's a real thing. There's the mind virus. There's the cannibalistic monster. They are the same thing, do come from the same place, prey on the same weaknesses, and I think have the same end result. Something I did want to say at kind of the beginning, it just ties into this, is the meaning, like the rough meaning for Wendigo is the evil spirit that devours mankind. And that could be taken like literally and figuratively, like micro, macro. And I think that's what this is, like big, small.
Yeah.
Your shadow, your own shadow, your shadow self, plus the cultural shadow that we've kind of created.
For sure.
Right?
For sure.
And is it a shadow possession? So I think that's kind of what I was going to get to with you. Do you think that Wendigo is a shadow possession? Because it, like the Swift Runner story, definitely, in my opinion, fits.
No, for sure. I mean, I think, everyone has dark thoughts. Everyone has trauma from at some point in their life. And I know that word's wildly overused today, and
it is
whatever. But yeah, I mean, there's if anyone were to think about the shadow part of yourself, what does it do when you let that take over, when you let depression take hold, or when you give into those, bad habits, whether it be like smoking, drinking, whatever, right? Like different addictions, different severities of them. But what happens when you actually just let those things take hold, there really is no stopping them. They do run rampant in your life. You kind of have to be conscious, and like you said, like, yeah, you have to sit and reflect on your shadow self and then integrate those lessons. And I think a lot of people spend time maybe reviewing their shadow, but then not learning from it and then integrating. And that's where you have to, that's where the difference comes. And it's, I don't know if you can, maybe Wendigo is in all of us and it just resides there permanently.
I believe that's like Paul Levy, as he explained, sort of, that's how it like, it's part, because we're all connected, right? And we're all connected. We're all part of everything. We're all like the shirt, like everything is connected, everything. And so it is in everyone.
Yeah.
Right. And it has the ability to attach itself or take over anyone as well at any moment.
Yeah. It's just about kind of keeping that monster at bay.
With creativity and following your path and finding your true calling and
compassion.
Those are the things, right? And he also talks as well, we keep going back to him, but I believe Jung does as well the same thing, which is, it's not just about confronting that shadow or the Witeko and identifying it and calling it out. It's also about looking at it and incorporating, because there is some of your good traits are hidden within that, right?
Yeah.
So it's finding those good traits within that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes me think of that saying, starve the ego, feed the soul.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think I mean, where we're at with today, far as, you know,
modern encounters,
where do we,
cultural resonance of the Wendigo,
where do we go from here, sort of thing. And I actually do see a lot of positivity. I know this is, you know, we start this out as like a scary thing and this thing that's kind of overtaken this country and just North America, you know, first world nations in general. But, you know, you are seeing a return to nature in a sense. A lot of people are getting interested in growing their own food, you know, traditional families, traditional family roles, and getting back to, you know, just communities and support. And I mean, that's kind of why we started this podcast, right? Was, you know, it can feel lonely in a world where you have differing views from people, or where you've kind of woken up to stuff before other people have. That loneliness can turn into anger, can turn into prejudice, can turn into all of these things that take you down a really nasty path. And I think the good thing about what I'm seeing in this community, as far as, I mean, we're, you know, just kind of dipping our toes in it, but what I have seen is just a willingness for people to learn and be curious again, which is nice. And I think like curiosity is ultimately your inner child coming
100%,
out.
Yeah.
So
breeds creativity.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's, you know, everyone needs to just do what they can to keep that monster at bay, to, you know,
because these are the times where it can prey on people, right?
Yeah.
And I know, I think before you and I started kind of talking about this sort of stuff, I was, you know, socially isolated. I kind of purposely, I think I didn't.
Yeah.
A lot of people in my life were no longer in my life. Not going to get into that, but you know what I mean? With what was going on in the world, there was a bit of a separation there. And I was always, you know, reading Twitter and things like that. And I was not a social, you know, I was never on social media before COVID. Actually, I've never had a Facebook account. Like, I'm not a social media person. It got me in there to keep up with what was going on. But I also didn't realize how messed up I was getting by looking at all those videos. And you know what I mean? You start getting anger and you feel it. And it went away when I started talking to you about all this. And it was putting the effort into something constructive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're still talking about, you know, weird monsters and stuff, but it's a way to kind of draw those shadows out in a fun, playful way.
Yeah. You know, we don't need any more fear, don't need any more anger, don't need any more violence. We need compassion and learning about ourselves. I think first is also the biggest one, and then moving outward from there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So there have been some, like, I know when you go on Reddit, because we're talking about modern encounters, right? Like, you go on Reddit or threads like that, there's like a 10-year thread about Algonquin Park in Ontario.
Yeah, that's like a big one.
But they call it Wendigo, but there's been no actual sightings. It's just noises and howls and
it's
feelings.
It has more of a Skinwalker vibe to it for sure. All the stories that I read, which I mean, obviously it's an adjacent,
exactly
theory, but yeah,
could be the same sort of thing though, right?
Yeah, definitely. You still hear northern Alberta. There's a lot of stories of. I mean, that's thick forest up there. That's really dense forest. Things be lurking.
Yeah, I listened to one that was from Sioux Lookout in 2019 as well, so not that long ago, and it was like a 2.5-minute clip of a strange noise. And it was odd. I've spent a lot of time in the bush, and especially in Ontario. I think it kind of sounded like a moose, but not really. It sounded like nothing I'd ever heard.
Sioux Lookout is a creepy town during the day.
Yeah, right.
It's an odd place.
I've
played shows there in the past, and it is an odd place. But but again, very the First Nations culture is actually still very prevalent up in that area.
Yep.
So I don't doubt that those stories are still circulating and
all that. And we're gonna beat this, but not to get too downtrodden. It like all those things started because those stories were passed on to warn about going through bad times. So basically don't
give in.
And hopefully people remember that as we move forward.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No matter what happens, no matter what goes on, just remember to be compassionate, good human being.
Yeah, definitely.
So pop culture. What Wendigo is everywhere.
Yeah. It's
since the novella was written. So
I mean, people can go out and watch Antler or the Wendigo movie, or there's a video game that's
Until Dawn, I think it's called.
Okay. Yeah. And even Slender Man, that I'd say that's the most recent that's the most recent connection I made. Is the Slender Man and very similar stories. I think the most recent one I read was from the US, but 2 grade school girls, 2 or 3 grade school girls, started with one who started talking to Slender Man. She recruited a couple friends to take one of their classmates out into the woods and unalive her. And that's, scary stuff. And I believe it was started actually from
that
online
crazy
thread, like a forum.
And certainly we don't need to get into them, but I couldn't even imagine how many cannibals, you know what I mean? Like whether it's serial killer or whatever, that have walked around since the time that book's been written, right?
Yeah.
Like, is that something that they were afflicted with? We don't need to get into it, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously we've gone over the modern cultural implications of Witeko, Wendigo, and where it's still being, pushed. And again, I think they're trying, I think they're trying to seed that idea and have people manifest it. I just don't think it's really working the way it once did.
It definitely seems from when you look at when they release movies and stuff about it, about every 20 years, they try to throw a Wendigo movie at you. It started, like it was in some comics in the 70s. I didn't know if you knew that. It was a character in Hulk. The Wendigo actually bites Hulk, and Hulk becomes Wendy Hulk. I thought you'd like that. That was pretty funny. Yeah. But that in that universe, in the Marvel comic world, the Wendigo is actually a manifestation of a curse.
There you go.
That's how they explain it. It's in some Spider-Man comics. Wendigo appears in Supernatural, the TV show, as a recurring character, in Charmed as a recurring character, where the Wendigo is actually like a werewolf, as you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
Comes out only when there's a full moon, so they kind of blend the two, you know what I mean? And then there's a bunch of movies in the 80s, and then there's the Wendigo movie that you mentioned before.
Yeah, which the director of that movie, Larry Fassenden.
Yeah, that's him.
This is
another Algernon Blackwood kind of, not as much, but
weird sync with that one. Completely kind of out there, but he looks an awful lot like Jack Nicholson in The Shining.
He really does. Do you know his son's name is Jack too?
No,
he has one son. He named him Jack.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay, so this guy look him up. He looks just like Jack Nicholson, at least at certain certain light.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
But I mean, The Shining itself could be considered a Wendigo story. You know, this guy becomes just consumed and tries to unalive his family.
Yeah.
And you know, Stanley Kubrick,
winter, fear, you know what I mean? Fear, like isolation. There's so many, so many things that he doesn't necessarily turn into a Wendigo right on camera with whatever they show it as now, like antlers, but he turns into like physically changes, right?
So at the end, when he freezes, when Jack Nicholson like freezes in the snow, he like one of the ways to destroy is you have to like the heart is frozen.
Huh.
Or that's like when it's finally like consumed. I forget what it was, but there's one story where they say like, "Can we help you?" And the guy laughs and says, "My heart has turned to ice."
Crazy.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Wild stuff.
Yeah. He looks a lot like, it's scary. When we first started, doing this, and I looked him up the first time, I thought I'd put in the wrong name, and I actually went back and put it in again, and the same picture popped up. I'm like, oh, that is him. I thought it was Jack Nicholson. That's how much he looks like.
Yeah.
And when you see pictures of him when he's younger, he looks like a young Jack Nicholson. Like when you see him in his 20s, he looks like
it's those weird template synchronicities, right? Where they all just kind of, they start to blend together.
Yeah. And he did a couple other Wendigo movies. So like this Larry Fessenden guy, it's almost like Wendigo is his muse.
He said in an interview that it was a story that was told him when he was 10 years old, which is like, that's young to be hearing about something so horrific. And it was one of the cannibalism.
Yeah. And it was a teacher who told him about a man who had a deer head in the forest. And that's what he's brought with him. And it's in Wendigo. It's and I think, what's the other movie called? The Last Winter, which is another movie he did 5 or 6 years after Wendigo. Mm-hmm. And then he did that video game we were talking about a little bit, Until Dawn. And that wasn't something he'd ever done, but he co-wrote that video game for PlayStation in 2015. And all the monsters are Wendigo in that. And loosely based, I think, on his movie.
His production company is called Glass. What was it?
Glass Eye Pix.
Yeah, Glass Eye Pix.
Yeah, crazy.
It's like a broken lens. Like, yes.
Comes from an affluent family. It's really hard to find anything about his family, but his dad was an investment banker. That's all it says.
Of course.
Yeah. You don't hear anything else, right? Just that his dad was an investment banker, and that he got kicked out of a bunch of private schools and founded this when he was in his 20s, I guess.
Yeah.
Other movies too, though. There's Ravenous. I don't know if you've seen that.
No.
Creepy movie. Dark was the night. Anyway. Yeah. So that's Larry Fessenden, a weird fella. He does, though. The one thing I will say is when you also read about him, he understands what this is. Yes. Like when you read his interviews, he understands what Wendigo is and Witeko. Like he gets it. He gets both sides of it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Like the two lessons. And he also he spoke about Algernon Blackwood a little bit, and his feeling is that Algernon Blackwood hijacked the oral traditions, and he's really interested in the Wendigo myth, and he's trying to he's trying to figure out what the truth is, and that's what he's trying to show.
Well, and that's where when I was saying the timing of his book was interesting, like, or when his story, like, he came to Canada kind of right after when the Swift Runner case was probably still just like being talked about, Yeah. But without jumping too far back here.
Can I give you a quote from Larry Fessenden?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So this is from a Daily Grindhouse interview in 2016. The interviewer was Patrick Smith. And the quote is, "All mythologies are simply the way we process reality. And it's good to know that, so you can step outside of it and have some control over your passions." Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, Larry Fessenden.
Yeah.
Interesting fella.
I think that probably about wraps it up for what we had with this one. Hey,
I don't know. I don't know what more to add.
Yeah. No, this was good. It was definitely, I know, obviously centered around Canadian culture and whatnot, but kind of, obviously applies to pretty much the whole world at this point.
Yeah, I don't know if spirits and entities and things like that follow borders. So
yeah, yeah, fair enough,
right? And especially that time, like when it came started coming to light what it was. Canada wasn't even a country, right?
For sure. Cool. Well, yeah, no, this was fun.
It was.
What else can we say here? I thanks for listening. If anyone out there actually wants to be on the show, you got a topic you want to discuss with us, 100% game, open. There'll be contact information down below there. Yeah, we got some exciting episodes coming up.
We do.
We're pretty stoked.
We going to talk about them now or just wait?
Nah, we won't. Yeah, we'll wait.
We do have some good ones coming up.
Yeah, we got our
just getting our feet wet now.
Yeah, we're you know, and got some guests on the way, but yeah, really appreciate everyone tuning in, and this is a lot of fun, and we'll keep rocking.
Yeah, and from the lands of the high seas and the tall trees, good night.
Peace out.